Well, there are a couple things that you and I, many more than a couple of things, but one of the things is that we know an awful lot about what doesn't work. And we talk about universities teaching entrepreneurship. I think you point out that in 1980 we had maybe 10 professors of entrepreneurship around the country. I happen to know one of them. It was a guy named Bill Haberly at Indiana University, who was typified by, he wore an orange jumpsuit the whole time, and I think this was before I think this was before prison guards used, or the prisoners had that. But he was quite a character. But he stood out as being different from everybody else, and he wasn't really part of the crew. But business schools, business plans, incubators, accelerators, mentors, you get into all this in the book.
Yeah. It's, professors with time on their hands and they're not really sure they can make anything happen. I mean, very few university programs can say, well, let me point to our 15 gazelles or our unicorns or our great successes, right? And if you point at them, it's not clear it happened. What is Harvard responsible for in Facebook, right? They take in a so-so looking kid who wants dates. That Harvard contributed to that? I don't think so. They gave him a dorm room, Later, by the way, Harvard being Harvard, at one point had a prohibition on running businesses in dorm rooms, if you can believe it, okay? So if these successes were happening, they worked very hard not to have more of them, okay? Okay. But anyway, professors being professors, one bad idea should follow another bad idea. So, now we have this ecosystem because people look at the Silicon Valley and they say, people weren't taking formal courses. What's in the water out there, right? Well, they had mentors, right? And they all had little garages. So maybe we could build kind of like a big garage and we'll call it an incubator. And then being entrepreneurial, incubators sort of got tired, so we call them accelerators, right? And then we'll have
incubators were too slow, so we're going to accelerate. Okay.
Yeah, and by the way, just another statistic. Okay, we have now about 1,400 incubators around America.
Yeah.
Every time you get a city that's failing, right? So I won't mention any, but think of any major city in the Northeast, right? They're not as big as they used to be, okay? Well, Detroit, say, Detroit had 2 million people once. It's got 700,000, and now it's got about 8 incubators, okay? Because entrepreneurs are going to save Detroit. But if you look at the 1,400 incubators, they're now about 10 years old on average. Over half of them never had a company that survived to 5 years, right? Nevertheless, it looks as if we do this, maybe we can make Silicon Valley happen right here in Elmira, New York.
Well, this is the place you need to tell your cargo cult story, because we've got this ritual where we're gonna sprinkle some things into Peoria, and we're gonna have an incubator, and we're gonna have mentors, we're gonna have accelerators, and all these things that are garages. We're gonna have garages in Peoria too. Yeah. Tell the cargo cult story.
I've actually been in incubators where they have a garage in the middle of the room, just in case nobody gets the formula, right? Anyway, the cargo cult story is actually one told, I found it again in Richard Feynman's book, the great physicist at Caltech. And essentially what it boils down to is a story anthropologists tell. We had, in the course of the war in the Pacific in World War II, we developed a South Seas island with an Air Force base. And when Americans got there, the Aboriginal people got addicted to the inflights of all the food and candy bars, and cigarettes, and all that stuff. And there was an air base, right? And then we withdrew quickly as the war moved closer and closer to Japan. But after the war in the 1950s, somebody visited, and people were going through the rituals of keeping the control tower. They had people in the control tower. They were fooling around with broken instruments. Somehow, it was a very, very remote island, very Aboriginal people, didn't understand anything. But the cult they had a religious cult that they did all the things, right? And they marched around with sticks like soldiers doing drills, that somehow the gods who brought candy bars and cargo to them would return someday, right? And I use that because it's sort of the same thing. Like, these seem to be the things that work in the Silicon Valley, right? So if we go through those motions, you know, we can make Elmira look like, you know, this is Palo Alto. Well, no, you know, just like once upon a time, Cleveland was a bubbling St. Louis, huge Chicago railroad city.
Yeah.
That's their essence, right? But when airplanes came, their future was always going to be different.